Today we are with Stormie Williamson. I had the pleasure of meeting him while I was in the cannabis industry. And I think we were out at an event and we met each other. And every once in a while you go to some events and meet some really great people. And we've kept in contact over the last 4 years. And I remember when you had your second son. And I know, Stormie, you've moved through several businesses in the cannabis industry, and I'm really proud of you for hanging in there and staying in the game, because it's a tough game to be in. And right now, you're the founder of Doja Labs. You take waste matter from larger farms, which normally is just tossed away or thrown into a shredder like we did at our facility, and you're turning that into a wonderful product that can be used as opposed to waste. So hi, Stormie.
Hi, how are you? How are you, ladies? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. We're honored to have you.
So tell us a little bit about Doja Labs.
Well, Doja Labs was, when I started, I'll kind of go back. When I started in the cannabis industry, I was lucky to start off with a company that had been in medical cannabis for a long time, won multiple dope cups, named Evergreen Extracts. And they were focusing on making distillate oil for retail use at that time. When I was in my early 30s, I kind of had some, tough times in my life, and felt like I kind of needed to reboot and kind of start over. So when I was around in about my mid 30s, I decided to go to business school. I think it was my first fall in business school, I think, when it was that Washington State had a vote to actually legalize cannabis. And as soon as that happened, I knew this was what I wanted to do. And I started, making plans all throughout business school to get out and start my own business. And I didn't know what that was going to look like, but, I knew that I wanted to do it. It was something that I had a passion for. I was lucky enough to find Evergreen at that time. And, the way that I found them is kind of funny, actually. I was just Googling cannabis companies and doing research on them and looking at their founders and whatnot. And what I saw at that time was overwhelmingly, well, pretty much every single cannabis company that I could find at that time didn't have any people of color in the ownership. And Evergreen was the first company where I found, and I saw a picture and I said, oh my God, this company has a black owner. And I told my wife at that time, I said, I'm going to work for this business right here. And then, I don't know if it was just luck or, all the stars aligned or whatever, but I actually did end up getting a job with them. So as soon as I graduated, I started working for them. This was during the period where Washington State had voted to legalize cannabis. The rec market was starting, but medical was still around and was still going to be around for a while. So I came in sort of at the tail end of the medical market cannabis. I got sort of lucky in that as Evergreen transitioned from medical over to rec, they realized that I'd been there and I'd put in work, and they kind of realized that, hey, we need somebody with this guy's skills, that has this kind of skill set going into this new market that, is highly regulated and we have to deal with all of these other new issues that we never had to deal with in medical cannabis. So they offered me a chance to become one of the owners at that time. Nice. So I was lucky in that I was able to, work my way into an ownership position really fast without, having to go out there and raise a bunch of capital and all that kind of stuff. And I was also lucky in that I was, working with people who had been in the medical field and had knowledge about a lot of things in cannabis that they were able to teach me, and I was able to learn. I, like a lot of people who are just starting off in the cannabis field at that time, thought, oh, I know everything I need to know about cannabis. I started smoking weed back my freshman year of college, and I've been doing this the whole time. And what is there about weed that I don't know?
Yeah.
But I soon found out that there was a mountain of things I didn't know. especially in what we were doing, which is, taking raw biomass and then going through the scientific process of turning that into a pure potent golden oil that can be used in various things, from vape carts to edibles to topicals. So working with Evergreen was great for me. That business wrapped up right at the end of last year, and so we were basically going out of business. We were working with a partner in the industry who was bought out by another company. They were going out of business, so the space we were operating in was going out of business, and also the sales, our sales at that time just weren't enough for us to keep on doing it. And as you guys know, it's tough to make it out here in the cannabis industry, especially in the retail market. Margins are very thin. Other than people who own retail stores, I don't know anybody that's getting rich doing this. If you're doing this, you're doing it because you have a serious passion for it.
Yes.
And so for the last 6 months, I've been working on, what that experience kind of taught me was that, hey, maybe this retail space isn't where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And while doing that, I was able to experiment kind of doing bulk distillate sales. And I realized that, hey, there's a huge market out there for this. There's a huge need out there for this. There's a number of farms that have this unused biomass that's basically just waste.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had created processes over years and working with, some of the smartest people around the country to develop a process to really take, biomass that couldn't be used for anything else, and to really be able to squeeze all of the cannabinoids out of there and make a pure, golden oil that could, take what was essentially a waste stream for them and turn it into a profit stream. So that's what I've been working on for the last 6 months, and getting my new company started. We're not focused on retail products at all. We just focus on working with farms and taking that biomass, turning it into a profit stream for them, and just doing business-to-business sales.
That's wonderful, and that's really, where a lot of companies in cannabis, they don't know how to make that change or make that move. They're just going down the same road. And getting into retail stores is tough business,
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
they change the buyer, or, you could lose an account just within an hour, and you're
Right.
fighting for something. So I really commend you for going down a whole nother avenue and really helping out those farms too.
Right. And that's one of the things that, you have to, that's one of the reasons I went to business school. I knew I wanted to start a business. I had started, businesses previously in my life. I didn't necessarily know what I was doing. Like a lot of people, I just kind of faked it till I made it. But that was one of the important lessons that I did learn in school, was about, recognizing when you have to pivot.
Okay.
And I think that's what a lot of other people are doing in the cannabis industry right now. Most cannabis companies right now are very vertically integrated, in that, you have, most cannabis companies are growing their own cannabis. They're packaging their own cannabis. They're making their own cannabis oil. They're making their own edibles. They're doing their own sales. They're doing their own marketing. They're literally doing everything. In most markets, that's not how things work. You have people that specialize in certain areas. And I think as this market grows up, and it's still, we're only 5 years into this.
Right.
I think we're going to see a lot of changes, and we're going to see a lot more of that. So like one of my former business partners is starting a new company where they just do packaging of flour for farms. Because there's a lot of farms out there who, I talk to these guys all the time, and they're just farmers. They just want to grow weed and cure it, and then get rid of it. They don't want to have anything to do with it after that. And so to have services out there like that can package the product for them and sell them and get it to stores, I think we're going to see a lot more of that over the next 5 years in the cannabis industry.
Yep.
Yeah, I love your path to the cannabis industry, because I think there's a misconception that, like you mentioned, you're like, I know everything because I have been smoking all my life, but you went to business school. I think there's a stigma still attached to the industry that it's just a bunch of stoners who want to grow weed and they don't know much about business. But I think, like you said, in order for this industry to thrive and grow, it has to start operating like other businesses that have these specialized, tasks and things like that. So I love that,
Definitely.
that path. Yeah.
Definitely. And I've seen huge changes just since this market first started. I can remember when stores first opened and back in medical, what packaging was like. I mean, no one paid attention to packaging and branding and that kind of stuff. And things are, 180 degrees different now. And so, you can see businesses starting to realize that these other things are very important. And you can see, a lot of businesses out there realizing that, they have to do other things in order to combat these very slim margins that they are dealing with, like automating certain things. I remember, tons of businesses when I first got into the market were just their plan for packaging and doing things was basically just hire more hands and put more people at it, but they quickly realized that, hey, our payroll is going out of control here, and although our sales may be up and we may be selling at the end of the month, we're actually losing money.
Yes.
So we have to find more efficient means to be able to do this. We have to find means to be able to automate certain things, and things that we're doing over and over again, like packaging or filling or whatever it might be.
Oh, yeah, agreed, 100%.
Yeah, and I think that might be one of the, you mentioned learning how to pivot prior to COVID. I think that one positive coming out of this experience is, that word is overused right now, pivot. But I think it's forcing businesses to say, hey, where can we, be more efficient, or what other streams of revenue can we create because of what's going on right now? What is the impact you see on the cannabis industry during COVID? I know it's been called an essential business now. Do you think it had a positive impact, or what are you seeing happening in that world?
Well, I mean, the numbers are in, and sales have definitely been up. So, the fact of the matter is that during COVID and during the quarantines and during a lot of people being out of work and all that kind of stuff, people seem to be buying and smoking more weed. It's just a fact. So I think a lot of cannabis companies have done pretty well during this period. The state making the move to keep cannabis companies open during that period was definitely needed. As you guys know, most cannabis companies are operating on such a tight cash flow and margins that if they had to shut down their doors for just 4 weeks or 6 weeks, it would be game over. They'd be out of business. Now, why did Washington State decide to do this? I don't think it's necessarily, they did it for the cannabis industry, or they did it because they were concerned about people being able to get their cannabis or something like that. I think primarily they did it because, look, the fact is that cannabis brings in tons of tax dollars. And so when you're going through something like that, you don't want to cut off a, stream of tax dollars that's coming in that the state's going to desperately need. And that's probably the major reason why it happened.
That's true. I'm glad you brought that up, because the state was something that was very difficult for us to work with. And, at first I thought, oh, that's great that they're keeping it open for mental health, or people need their medicine or that kind of thing. But you're probably right about that. They didn't want to lose the money, And that's unfortunate, but it's good for the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Stormie, right now, what should the cannabis industry be doing more socially, and how can they be more responsible given their history of, like you discussed earlier, you found one Black owner and you went to work for him, you were motivated by that.
It's tough to say. And even after 5 years of being in the legal cannabis market now, I can probably count on one hand the number of Black and brown owners that I know in the cannabis industry. Now, there's a number of people of color, working as bud tenders or working for companies or doing other things, but I'm talking about actual owners. And I think that was probably an area when cannabis was voted to be legalized in Washington, and they started making moves to do that. I think that the state probably should have focused on this issue when it was first starting, and making sure that the opportunity was spread evenly amongst people of color, amongst women. And I don't think that was really done. And so, the cannabis market that we see right now is like a lot of other markets that have been around for 100+ years. It's dominated by white males. What can be done about it now? And there's a part of me that thinks maybe it's too late to do something about it, or but what I hope can happen, and what gives me hope, is the sort of thing we're seeing right now with the protests that are going on with George Floyd and stuff, and the fact that you see that it's it's not just people of color out there marching. It's not just people of color out there protesting. It's a lot of white people, especially the energy that we're getting from a lot of the younger white kids that are out there. And I think that it's probably that more than anything else that's really helped this be a catalyst for what looks like is going to be real change in the near future. I think it just helps for people out there to realize that this isn't a Black versus white issue or something like that. This is really a human rights issue. This is about humans being treated fairly. This is about all humans having the right to be treated decently. And I think, maybe the cannabis industry needs the same thing. Maybe the cannabis industry needs a lot of these, white male owners in the cannabis industry to see that, hey, I don't know a lot of Black and brown owners in this industry. Is this fair? And what can I do to stand up and help make this change in order to make things more fair? I think we probably need something like that. And I also think it should probably be a lesson for those who are lobbying in other states now to legalize cannabis in the coming future, to realize that when you do legalize cannabis, it doesn't just stop there. We need to work to make sure that once it is legalized and the market is open, that the opportunity is spread out evenly, and there's things that are done to make sure that everyone has a equal chance to get into that market. It's a brand new thing. Essentially, cannabis industry has created billions of dollars of wealth in this country, and we want to make sure that everybody has a chance at obtaining a piece of that wealth, if that's something that they want to get into.
Right. Yeah, I think that I personally feel that the cannabis industry has a huge responsibility in the conversation around systemic racism because of the impact that the war on drugs has had on primarily communities of color. And having that responsibility of creating a more equitable industry. Not only that, but how are your business practices diverse? Are you looking at people that have maybe they have a misdemeanor or a felony on their record that couldn't get a job somewhere else? They were in a non-violent cannabis offense. But I feel like there's a lot of work that the cannabis industry can and should do, especially like you said, it's making people very, very wealthy. And if someone's out here legally making millions off of something that someone's sitting in prison for doing the same thing 10 years ago, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I really feel that.
Sir, totally agree. I mean, I think that's something that everybody in the cannabis industry, there's, there's an organization I'm sure you guys have heard of called the Last Prisoners Project. That's something that everybody in the cannabis industry should be getting involved with, giving money to, giving time to, doing whatever they can, because just like you said, yes, anybody that's in prison right now for, that went to prison years ago for, I mean, there's literally people who are in prison right now who went to prison 10 years ago or something for selling a pound of weed, and got multiple years in prison, and it just doesn't make any sense. Like right now I can, there's multiple times where I've taken a box truck and headed out to a farm and picked up 700 to 1,000 pounds of weed, and brought it back to our place to process, and I haven't had to worry at all in doing that. If I got pulled over by the cops, I wouldn't have been worried at all. I just show them my manifest. They say, okay, thank you, go on about your way. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the things that everyone in the cannabis industry should definitely be focused on, making sure that we do everything we can to make sure that anyone that's in prison right now for, having sold cannabis in the past when it wasn't legal, getting all of those people out of prison.
Yep. Yeah, I follow Last Prisoner Project, and I sign all their petitions and donate, and I love that organization. I think that they're doing really great things. You're up in the Seattle area, right?
I am.
How's the feeling up there right now with all the protests? I've been seeing that it's been making national news. There's a beautiful mural, and what's the vibe like up there?
Yeah, well, it seems like there's a lot of the people in the media right now. If you look on media and you look in social media, you see a lot of people talking about what's going on in Capitol Hill right now, this CHAZ zone or whatever it's called. I'm not sure what that's all about. I mean, I've had friends who have been down there. I haven't been there personally, but I've had friends who have been there that say it seems like a good thing. I think what the protesters are asking for, at least one of the demands, from what I understand, there's two main demands that they have right now, and one is that everyone who was arrested during the protest the charges be dropped. And the other thing I think they want is to cut the budget of the cops. And there's a lot of this going on right now. The whole defund the police thing is happening, and I think that's a larger conversation to have. And I think that's a very important conversation to have, and to see what that looks like in the future. And I think I don't know if defunding the police is the message that I would necessarily put out there. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but I do think we need to take a look at how we police people and what that means. So, you guys were talking earlier about the fact that I have two young sons. One of them's 5, and like a lot of other 5-year-old boys, he loves the police. 2 Halloweens he's dressed up as a cop, twice now, and he thinks it's cool. And there's a show that was just recently canceled, Live PD. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but it's like from when we were kids, they had cops.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing, except it's completely live. Well, he loves that. He loves that show. So I've seen that a lot. And one of the things I've noticed in watching that show is that I would say 8 out of 10 of the situation that the cops on that show are dealing with are either with people who have a drug problem, people who are drunk, people who have mental illness problem, or it's some kind of domestic issue where, a husband and wife are fighting, or a mother and a son, or something like that. And so I think the question we need to ask is it really necessary when we're dealing with these situations, when we're dealing with, basically non-violent situations, is it necessary to have cops out there with guns dealing with all these situations, or should we focus our effort on having, specially trained cops that are good with dealing with these situations? um, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have cops with guns out there. Certainly, there's situations where we need armed police out there. I mean, if somebody breaks into my house tonight, I'm definitely calling the cops, and I want an armed cop to show up. Um, but I think that maybe we need to have fewer of those, and they need to be very focused. And those people who get that kind of job, maybe that needs to be a little more highly paid, and it needs to be a higher caliber person who can deal with that kind of situation. Um, you know, it, we really need to focus on training and making sure that those people, that we are putting really quality people out there who are able to, work under high stress situations, keep their cool, and they understand, that they're only pulling their firearm out to use it when it's absolutely necessary.
Right.
I think one of the problems right now is that there's just not a lot of training that
Right.
police are getting. If you look at things like the kind of training that Navy SEALs have to go through before they get to go out to their first mission or something like that, they're way more well trained than the average cop is. And I think that some of these cops that have, shot people of color in situations where they weren't armed, were some of these cops racist? Almost certainly, yes. But almost certainly, some of these cops probably weren't. I think some of them were people who weren't trained properly, found themselves in a what they perceived to be a dangerous situation, and they didn't know how to respond correctly, and so what they did was they pulled out the firearm and they shot. um, and so I think we need to focus on, looking at, maybe we need to have special police that just deal with traffic, and we need to look at the how the police are funded. And so, there's some situations where it's almost like they set it up for the cops to be against the people, and I don't think that's the way it should be. The cops in the community should be one, and should be a lot more connected. I think the cops should know more people in the community. The people in the community should know the cops. It's like, I would love to be able to see cops in my community and know them by name, um, and I think we're just not getting that now. And I think that's probably the areas we want to focus on in the future. And just like I said, for all the issues where the overwhelming majority issues where the cops are called, which are, drugs and drunkenness and mental illness and domestic issues. Maybe we don't need to have cops showing up to that, armed cops showing up to that kind of stuff. Maybe we need to have trained cops. And I'm not saying they're not armed at all. Maybe they have a taser or something on them, um, but maybe we need to have special cops that are trained for those kinds of situations, showing up and dealing with that kind of stuff. And we need to have, specially trained, very well trained armed cops to deal with the situations when they arise, when you do need an armed cop to show up and deal with that.
Yeah, agreed. That's a really good aspect to come from it. I like
Yeah,
that.
I think that I was talking to somebody else recently about the messaging around defund the police and how it's being misinterpreted as disbanding the police. And someone was like, they need a better marketing message around that, because
Yeah.
they interpret it like, oh, we're just going to have a, free for all in a community that's no police. And that's really not, like you said, that's not the goal or the message.
No.
So I think
Well, you guys know all about branding, obviously. And yeah, that was just branded badly. Had they consulted you guys before they made that message, it probably would have come out a lot better. Because a lot of people hear that and they think, defund the police, that means there's not going to be any police. Well, I don't know, I don't want no police.
Right.
But yeah, that's not really what we want to do. What we want to do is, change the police. I think definitely changing the way that police are trained, and also, we need to look at changing the way that we deal with people when they get arrested, just like I was talking about with the
Yeah.
show that I watch, and
Mm.
seeing that, you know, most of the people the cops are dealing with, a lot of them, it's either drugs or they're drunk or it's a mental illness problem. But we need to, you know, rather than, I don't think it helps to arrest someone who is a drug addict and put them in jail. You know, I think we need to have other outlets for that. And we need to, you know, if someone's arrested and they have a meth problem or something like that, instead of being taken to jail, they need to be, you know, they need to go on some kind of path where they're allowed to go into a 90-day treatment program and get help. I've dealt with addiction problems in my past for my own self. I've seen it happen in friends and family and stuff like that. And, you know, a lot of times people are just in a difficult position in their
Yeah.
lives at that time. And they just need that little extra help. But, you know, prison doesn't help that. Having a felony on your record isn't going to help that. Going to treatment and getting help and dealing with your drug issue is going to help that. Most drug addicts aren't criminals. They're just people who have, you know,
Yeah.
addiction problems that they happen to be dealing with at that moment.
Exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, society has criminalized people with addiction issues instead of treating it as a, mental health or public health issue. There's a country, don't quote me on this, I think it's Portugal, but many years ago they decriminalized drugs and funneled that funding into the public health system instead of the criminal justice system. And they've had really positive results, getting people into rehabilitation instead of, like you said, just tossing them in jail, because that just, enhances the issue and makes them feel like a criminal when they're really not. Like you said, they just need that little extra help. So
yeah.
That's a great.
Right. I mean, there's times, and I mean, I certainly could have been many years ago, and I've been sober for like 14 years now or something like that. But there could have been a time in my life when I would have been that person, and I was just lucky to not end up in the system. But if that had happened, my whole life would have been changed.
Yep, completely. I feel the same.
Yeah.
I think anyone of color could easily. Yeah. I mean. Easily have been.
Yeah, we've seen all of
system.
Yeah, our family is partied up late night. They start beating each other up. It's just kind of normal, and then the cops show up, and definitely understand all of that. Love your aspect on that and your vision. Speaking of visions, where would you like to see the cannabis industry in 10 to 20 years from now?
10 to 20 years. Wow, in the life of the cannabis industry, that's a long time. But
100 years in cannabis.
Exactly. Let's start on 10 years.
Okay.
I think definitely within 10 years or 12 years, somewhere around there, I'd like to see cannabis in the US be federally legal.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of states are looking at the model of places like Washington State and Oregon and some of the other states that are legal, Cali, and they're looking at the way that the legal market has been able to come in, and the way that it just makes things a lot safer. The black market, I think, in Washington State is almost gone. I mean, if you asked me to go find some weed just from a dealer who, I don't know if that would even be possible. That would take me weeks probably to find that person. And when you look at a lot of other states where cannabis isn't legal, those are also the places where it isn't safe. And where's that money going to? We have to ask that question. Is it going to criminal organizations who are then costing us more money to fight them? I think we can take the money away from these organizations. We can give it back to normal people. We can make cannabis safe. I think in Washington State right now, cannabis is the safest it's ever been. The cannabis you buy at the store has been tested for pesticides, what the potency is, what the grow medium is, all of the stuff. If you're in a state where cannabis isn't legal and you're just buying it from some guy, you don't know what's going on with it. And the fact is that it's a lot more dangerous. I think it's a lot easier for people underage to get their hands on. You know, I think in Washington State right now, it's probably way harder than it used to be for underage people to get a hold of cannabis. And so I think that other states will look at that, and I think they're also going to look at obviously the tax dollars that cannabis raises, and so yeah, what I'm hoping is in the next 10 to 12 years, cannabis will definitely be federally legal. Beyond that, what I hope is, you know, countries like the US and like Canada can be models for a lot of other countries around the world, and show them that, hey, cannabis can be a good thing. Cannabis market can be a great thing, and there's a lot of positives that come with it. And you know, within 20 years, maybe I'm a dreamer, but I hope maybe one day it can be globally legalized, or at least, you know, mostly globally legalized. There's probably some places that are just never going to legalize cannabis, but you know, at least if we can get most of the world on board, I mean, hell, who knows what the cannabis market could look like then.
Right. Just like the alcohol world, legal everywhere.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so great. We love hearing your perspective and all that good stuff.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. And I really,
Well,
I admire you, Stormie, for weathering the cannabis industry. As you know, 3.5 years in, I couldn't do it anymore. It's a tough business. It's a tough market. And there's a lot of interesting personalities and people in it. And I really am thankful that I met you, and we've continued our friendship. And we appreciate you. And just, I'm glad that you have your new business, and I know it's going to be successful. And let us know if you need anything.
I will do.
Yeah,
and you know, just sorry, go ahead,
dojalabs.com. Keep our eye on.
dojalabs.com. Yeah,
Okay.
dojalabs.com.
Right.
And you know, just like you, I've seen a lot of other very smart people get out of this market. That, you know, just like you said, you know, this is too tough, and there's just too many things that are working correctly right now. And the reason that I'm here right now is because when I started this off, I made a commitment that I was going to, it's kind of like the Malcolm Gladwell thing about it takes 10,000 hours, about 10 years of solid work to become to become an expert in anything. And, you know, I decided and I made a commitment that, hey, I'm going to put in at least 10 years into this thing, and then see where I'm at then. And so, you know, I just kind of decided that no matter what happens, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep on pushing forward. And all I can hope is that in the end, all of that hard work and commitment and passion is going to pay off in the end.
It will. And we respect you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excited to see where your business goes, and we'll be following along the journey.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Stormie.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, ladies. Thank you for having me. You have a great day.
Thank you. It's an honor.